You say you want results, but what you really want is the reward without the transformation. And that's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to hear. Because results don't come from wanting, they come from becoming. And becoming requires something most people avoid their entire lives: relentlessness. Let's be honest, you don't lack information. You don't lack opportunity. You don't even lack potential. What you lack is the willingness to stay locked in when it stops being exciting, when it stops being motivating, when nobody is clapping, when progress is invisible. That's where most people disappear. Everyone loves the idea of success. The money, the respect, the freedom. But almost nobody wants the daily grind that comes before it. The repetition, the boredom, the isolation, the pressure, the self-doubt. The long stretches where nothing seems to work. That's the price, and if you're not willing to pay it, you're not entitled to the outcome. Relentlessness isn't about intensity for a week. It's about consistency for years. It's about showing up when you're tired, when you're bored, when you're frustrated, when quitting feels justified. Anyone can work hard when they're motivated. Very few can work when they're not. That's the separator. You want results, but you still negotiate with your comfort. You still listen to excuses. You still let your emotions decide your actions. And as long as you do that, you'll stay exactly where you are. Because discipline doesn't care how you feel. Relentlessness doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It moves regardless. Look around. Average people aren't average because they're stupid. They're average because they stop. They slow down. They settle. They convince themselves they've done enough. They choose comfort over growth again and again until that choice becomes their identity. Relentless people are different. Not because they're superhuman, but because they refuse to quit on themselves. They refuse to lower the standard. They refuse to let temporary discomfort steal long-term potential. They don't need motivation. They operate on principle. Here's the part that hurts. You already know what you should be doing. You just don't do it consistently. You know when to wake up earlier, when to stop scrolling, when to train harder, when to work instead of procrastinate. You don't need another plan. You need a higher tolerance for discomfort. Relentlessness is built in silence, when nobody is watching, when nobody cares, when results are slow, when effort feels pointless. That's when it matters. That's when your future is being decided. Not on the good days, on the days you want to quit. Most people quit mentally, long before they quit physically. They start cutting corners, lowering standards, making excuses sound logical. That's how it starts. Slowly, quietly. And then one day they look up and realize they're years behind where they could have been. Relentlessness means you don't let that slide. You catch yourself slipping and you correct immediately. You don't wait for a breakdown. You don't wait for a wake-up call. You hold the line even when it's uncomfortable. This isn't about being extreme. It's about being honest. Honest about your effort. Honest about your discipline. Honest about whether you're actually doing what's required or just doing what feels good. Comfort lies. Progress doesn't. If you want results, you have to become the kind of person who doesn't need external pressure. You push yourself. You hold yourself accountable. You don't wait for deadlines, consequences, or motivation. You move because that's who you are. Relentlessness is a mindset shift. It's the moment you stop asking, "How do I feel?" and start asking, "What needs to be done?" That question alone will change your life because it removes emotion from the equation. And emotion is what keeps most people stuck. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And if your system is built on motivation, it will fail. Motivation fades, relentlessness doesn't, because it's not a feeling. It's a decision made daily. This path is lonely. Let's not lie about that. When you become relentless, you separate. Your priorities change. Your tolerance for nonsense drops. You stop relating to excuses, and that creates distance. But that distance is necessary. You can't build something rare while living like everyone else. Being relentless means you're willing to be misunderstood, willing to be judged, willing to be called obsessed, because you know the alternative: staying average, staying comfortable, staying stuck. And you've already decided that's unacceptable. And the moment you stop negotiating with yourself, the moment you stop asking for easier paths, the moment you commit fully, everything changes. Not overnight, but permanently. This is where it starts. Not with motivation, with a decision to be relentless. Relentlessness isn't loud. It doesn't scream on social media. It doesn't announce itself with quotes or hype. It shows up quietly, day after day, doing the same hard things long after the excitement died. That's why most people never develop it. They confuse intensity with consistency. They go all in for a week, maybe a month, then disappear when the work stops rewarding them emotionally. You've felt this before. That phase where you were fired up, where everything felt possible, where discipline felt easy because motivation was high. But motivation is a liar. It shows up when things are new and leaves when things get real. Relentlessness is what stays when motivation leaves the room. Here's the truth nobody wants to admit. You don't stop because you can't do it. You stop because it gets uncomfortable, because progress slows, because the effort feels heavier than the reward in the moment. And instead of pushing through that phase, you retreat. You call it balance. You call it rest. You call it self-care. But deep down, you know when you're lying to yourself. Relentless people don't wait for clarity. They act in uncertainty. They don't need guarantees. They don't need perfect plans. They move forward even when they're not sure it will work. Because movement creates answers. Stagnation creates excuses. Most people want proof before effort. Relentless people give effort before proof. That's why they win. They don't need validation to keep going. They don't need external reassurance. Their confidence is built from keeping promises to themselves, not from results alone. This is where self-respect is born, not from achievements, but from discipline. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when it's hard, you reinforce your identity. You become someone you can trust. And once you trust yourself, you become dangerous. Relentlessness reverses that damage. Slowly, painfully. You rebuild trust by showing up when it's inconvenient, by doing the work when nobody's forcing you, by choosing the hard option even when the easy one is right there. You have to understand this. Your mind will always look for exits, always look for comfort, always try to protect you from discomfort. That's its job. But if you obey every signal your mind sends, you'll never grow. Growth requires overriding that instinct. That's why discipline feels unnatural at first. Because you're going against your default programming. You're choosing long-term benefit over short-term relief. And that choice has to be made again and again until it becomes who you are. Relentlessness also means standards. High ones, non-negotiable ones. You stop asking how little you can do to get by and start asking how much you can handle without breaking. You raise the bar for yourself and refuse to lower it when things get tough. This is where many people get uncomfortable with you. Because when you raise your standards, you expose theirs. Your consistency highlights their inconsistency. Your discipline makes their excuses louder. And instead of rising, some will try to pull you back down. That's part of the price. You have to be willing to outgrow environments that reward weakness. To distance yourself from people who normalize quitting. Not out of arrogance, out of necessity. Relentlessness requires sacrifice, time, energy, relationships, comfort. You can't have everything. You have to choose. And if you choose greatness, something else has to go. Usually the things that feel good but add nothing to your future. This means boring routines, repetitive days, doing the same things even when you're tired of them. That's where momentum is built. Not in novelty, in repetition. You don't need to be extreme. You need to be consistent. Extreme bursts burn out. Consistency compounds. And compounding is invisible at first. That's why people quit before it shows results. That's the edge. Not talent, not luck. Staying power. You don't become relentless overnight. You train it. One hard decision at a time. One uncomfortable action at a time. One day where you didn't feel like it but did it anyway. Those days stack. They change you. They harden you. They give you a quiet confidence that doesn't need approval. And eventually, you reach a point where quitting no longer feels like an option. Not because it's impossible, but because it's beneath you. That's when results start chasing you instead of the other way around. You wanted results. This is the cost. Relentlessness. Not as a phase, as a lifestyle. At some point, being relentless stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like identity. You're no longer forcing yourself to do the work. You're no longer negotiating with your mind every morning. You just move. Because that's who you are now. Someone who finishes. Someone who doesn't fold. Someone who doesn't need permission. This is the moment most people never reach, because they quit right before this shift happens. They quit when it still feels heavy, when it still feels like sacrifice. They never stay long enough to feel the payoff internally, not the results, the certainty. Relentlessness gives you certainty. Certainty that no matter what happens, you'll adapt. Certainty that setbacks won't end you. Certainty that pressure won't crush you. And once you have that, fear loses its grip. Because fear only controls people who doubt their ability to endure. You stop asking yourself if you're capable. You already know the answer. You've proven it too many times. Through repetition, through consistency, through days where you wanted to quit but didn't. That proof stacks, and it changes how you see yourself. This is where confidence becomes unshakable. Not loud confidence. Not ego. Quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't need validation. The kind that doesn't panic when things go wrong. Because you've been through worse. And you're still standing. Relentlessness rewires how you respond to pain. Pain stops being a signal to stop. It becomes information, feedback. A reminder that you're pushing limits, that you're expanding, that you're alive. While others avoid discomfort at all costs, you've learned to function inside it. That's why you start to outpace people who once seemed ahead of you. Not because you're smarter, but because you're harder to break. While they slow down to recover emotionally, you keep moving. While they wait for motivation, you rely on structure. While they hesitate, you execute. And here's the part nobody likes to say out loud. Being relentless will cost you. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you ease. It will cost you certain relationships. You won't fit everywhere anymore. You won't tolerate the same conversations. You won't find satisfaction in the same distractions. That's not a flaw. That's the trade. You can't become uncommon while living a common life. You can't demand extraordinary results while maintaining ordinary habits. Something has to give. And the moment you accept that fully, without resentment, without complaint, you become free. Free from comparison. Free from excuses. Free from the constant mental noise of should I and what if. You know what needs to be done, and you do it. That simplicity is power. Relentlessness also teaches you patience. Not passive patience, active patience. The kind that understands progress takes time but still demands effort every day. You stop chasing shortcuts. You stop looking for hacks. You respect the process because you trust it. You understand that success isn't built in moments of inspiration. It's built in seasons of discipline. Seasons where nobody notices. Seasons where the work feels repetitive and unrewarded. That's where foundations are laid. And once a foundation is strong, everything built on top of it lasts. This is where you stop seeking approval. You don't need people to understand your grind. You don't need applause. You don't need recognition. The work itself becomes the reward. The growth becomes the satisfaction. The standard becomes non-negotiable. You hold yourself to it even when no one's watching. That's when you realize something important. You're no longer chasing results. You're chasing alignment. Alignment between who you say you want to be and how you live daily. And that alignment creates momentum that's impossible to stop. Relentlessness doesn't mean you never rest. It means you rest with intention. You recover to perform again, not to escape. You don't use rest as avoidance. You use it as strategy. Big difference. You become precise with your energy. You stop wasting it on nonsense, on drama, on distractions, on things that don't move you forward. Your focus sharpens because your goals demand it. And over time, people notice. Not because you announce it, but because results speak. Your posture changes. Your presence changes. The way you carry yourself changes. You don't rush. You don't panic. You don't flinch easily. Because you know who you are. Relentlessness gives you that. Identity, stability, control. And now you understand. Results are a byproduct. Relentlessness is the source. So when it gets hard again, and it will, when progress slows, when doubt creeps in, when the voice in your head tries to negotiate, remember this moment. Remember the standard you chose. You don't stop because it's uncomfortable. You don't quit because it's difficult. You don't fold because it takes time. You stay. You work. You endure because you're relentless.